Hey you folks, and welcome to another Unity Bits tutorial, and we're here looking at UI. How do we communicate the changes from our game state and make them visual? So really this is a problem of making the data and the changes in that data visible to the user. And that is we will basically look at that problem or that issue and how to solve it in different ways. And the first way that I want to look at is just a basic straightforward way. First, I guess I should explain what I'm doing. Okay. Let me tell you what the setup is real quickly, and that is I'm using the latest version of C# or .NET 4.x or equivalent. I'll show you how to get there. You go to Build Settings, Player Settings, and we scroll all the way down, and you see right here I'm using 4.x. So without that, some of the newer C# 6 features won't work, and they're so nice to have that I have switched over. They're wonderful. Okay, so I have a UI canvas here in the scene. I have an event system as well, of course, all the standard stuff. I have a text component attached, and I also have a text mesh pro text. And I see the text UI text component says health, and we're going to do some demonstrations with the text mesh component. And that one at this point says food. That's not extremely important, but let's look at how we might implement this just initially. So what I've got here is really, I should call this main. I have a game object here, and I have this script called UI1. And it has a public property with our public field of health, and in that I have put my text component, right? So now I'm hooking this up to be so that when the health changes, this text component will be updated. So let's look at the code for this very simple implementation. So first of all, here is my public text element, health. So we connect this in the inspector. So we'll connect this to the desired UI text component in the inspector. Yes, standard stuff, right? Now here is the data value that we want to track / report. Okay. So very simple. I want to report on HP. So anytime HP changes, I want to basically change the text of this text component. So when the script is initialized, we set health.text equal to and if you haven't seen this is a new C# thing. It's string interpolation, where you can actually put curly braces inside of your string, and then whatever's inside of that will be stringified. So they will take the value of HP and put it in there. It's wonderful. So we're setting it to that value of HP. And then when I do an update, I'm doing the input. When I get the space key, I am decreasing the hit points by 20, and right here I'm just making sure that it doesn't go below 0. And then I am setting that health text to say what I want it to say. So if you notice that here, anytime we want to manipulate or deal with this data, we also have to manipulate or deal with the text component that represents the data in our scene. So this is literally 2 operations that you have to do. Now, if you only do it in one place, that's one thing. But typically with these types of things, health or ammo or whatever you want to track or show on your UI, that is usually everywhere inside of your script. It's not just in one place, it's a bunch of places. So anyway, with that being said, and so you have a tour of this initial implementation, let's go ahead and hit play, and I'll show you here that health starts out at 100, and then as I hit the space bar, it goes down to 0. Pretty nice. Not too bad. But we can do better. So here's how we do better. So this right here is just not, it's not acceptable. Well, we can change this. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a property, and we're going to call it health. And we'll just implement the get, and we'll just return HP. And then when we set it, we'll just set HP equal to the value, and then we'll add this. And then here we can say health equals 100. And then right here, and then we'll just, so we can say health equals health minus 20. So that cleans us up quite a bit. And then whenever we refer to our health anywhere in the code, we can use that property. And you see it still works. And instead of having to perform both of these operations anywhere that we change this HP value, we only have to utilize the property. And that works fine. I've used it before, especially in game jams. But we can do even better than that. And so let's look at or enter in the Unity event. So let's use a Unity event. So the question is, why would we want to use a Unity event? Well, this is our problem. We have data. And when that data is updated, we want to display it, or we want to change the display, or we want to be notified that that data is being updated, specifically here in our user interface on our text component here. So what we want is really what's called is an observer pattern. And that is just simply you have a data source, and then you have, say, a user interface. So the data source would be of course, the source, and then a user interface would have maybe one, such as we have here, or more components that want to listen to when that data changes. And so that's called the observer pattern. So it lets a subscriber register and receive notifications from a provider. So in our case, the provider would be our health. So let's see how we might do that here. So instead of this, what we can do is we can say public Unity event. And what's nice is Unity has several different versions of this. They have the standard with no arguments, and then they have various ones all the way up to 4 arguments. We only need one argument, which would be a string, since we're looking at text boxes or text UI. So we would do this, Unity event string. Let's just say, I don't know, health. So basically, this goes away, and this becomes health. Now, there's an issue with this because with generics, you have to override the class type, or this will not serialize at all. So you won't see it in the inspector. So what we're going to do is we want to go ahead and grab the serializable variable, and we want to say, let's call it UI string event, and then we'll just derive that from Unity event of string, and then that will serialize, and then we can just open, close, and then all we have to do is this. Okay, so now we have that, and the Unity event doesn't now have a particular text value. Instead, what it does have is a .invoke function, which calls all of the subscribers back with the value that we give it here. So as you might guess, we simply replace our desired text inside there, and now we're good to go. So let's head back to the Unity editor, and we'll go back to main here, and now you see we have this, and this is probably familiar. You're probably used to seeing this kind of stuff for Unity events. The advantage of Unity events over something such as, say, like a public event, say action of string, is that doesn't serialize in Unity, and it can't. The inspector will not display that, so you can't hook things up to that. So that's the advantage of this guy is it's serializable events, which will save the state whenever you hook things up to it. So let's hook our text up to this, and how do we do that also? So let's grab this text component here, and we'll put it in here. So now when we're basically, this is a subscriber, and now we need to tell this subscription what method to call back whenever we call invoke on this, whenever that value changes. So there's any component on this object we can look into, and if it has a public function that takes a string, we can call that. But what we're interested in is this text component, because we actually want to change the text here on this text component, right? So we're interested in this text component, and we have these dynamic properties, because if we can come down here and we can say string text under the static parameters, then it gives us a text box, and we can type something in there, which basically just sends that string every time we call invoke on our event, which that's not what we want. What we want is the ability to send that text and see these dynamic string. So any of these will actually take a string, and that text is what we want, because that actually sets the text of the UI component. So now whenever we press play, we'll see our health is 100, 80, 60, 40, 20, 0 as I hit the space bar, and that's what we want. So one of the other advantages of this is that we can have multiple subscribers to this event. And remember that these subscribers can have different, it can be a field or it can be a function that takes a string that we can basically call back into it whenever our data changes. So what's cool is I can come over here to this Text Mesh Pro component, which is a different component, completely different than this text. And I can pull it in here, and then I can go to the Text Mesh Pro UGUI dynamic string, and then it also has a text field on it. And now you'll see that both of these will say health, and they will respond the same way. So that's phenomenal. We've got it, right? This is basically what we want. Well, I say that we can do better than that. Because if you look, we still have two values here, two things that we have to keep up with. One is the event, and then the other one is the actual data. And then we're encapsulating that in a property. So why don't we shove all of this stuff into a class so that we can just have one thing, and then we can just interact with that one thing, and it does all this stuff for us. That, my friend, is what we're going to do. So we're going to take this event, and let's call this, let's just call this, for now, let's call this an observable. All right, so now let's put and I'm going to make this a protected. We'll put this as our value. So this is the value this is the actual data, the data. Okay, and so then let's make a public int, and let's call it value. So we'll have a get, and that'll return the value. And then we'll have a set, and that's where we're going to do this same thing right here. So that would be val equals value. And then since we're deriving from UnityEvent, we have access to that invoke. So we'll just invoke it, and then we can invoke this. And I know if you're thinking, if you're looking at this, you're like, wait a minute, there's an issue. But okay, just wait. Let's finish with this, and you'll see what we'll do. So now we have this observable that sends out a string event whenever its value changes. This is good, but I can think of several instances where I may want not just an integer, but maybe a float, or maybe even a Boolean flag that it's sent out, and then it's converted to a string, basically. So let's, instead of just do an integer, let's make this a little more useful, and let's make this generic. So instead of an int, we'll make it of type t, like that. And remember, when we invoke, we're still invoking a Unity event of type string because that's what we're deriving from. So when we hit invoke, we still do a conversion to the string. And now here we're going to want to do int like that. Okay, so let's remove all of this stuff here and let's see if we can't get this working. And again, this is an issue, but we'll deal with that momentarily. Let's go ahead and make this capital H so that we can just kind of get through this, no problem. Value. So now we have to do health.value since that's accessing the actual data. And then we'll say health.value equals health.value minus 20. So let's see if we did all that right, and let's see if we pop up over here. And we don't, and that is because yes, that's right. So this is much like the same, this is the same issue as with any sort of generic class, and why you must override the class type whenever you're doing a generic that you want to show up in the inspector, except for lists, like a list of type T. So what we'll have to do here is say public class, let's say int observable, and then we'll just say observable event. So we're doing it pretty much the same as we did that Unity event last time. And now that's going to show up. We need to stick the serializable attribute on that for that to work. So now we'll see that over here, and we'll be able to plug it in. It's going to be great. Fantastic. There we are as our list. And let's grab the text here, the regular text component, and we'll tell it to update that text field. It will hit play, and we can see that that gets updated correctly. And remember, this is way nicer because in our source, which would be here in this class, we don't care who listens, and we don't know who listens. So we don't care. All we do is we send out this changed event whenever this value changes, which is exactly what we want. And also, by the way, you can also subscribe to these like this, and it will add a listener this way, so you can actually have another class that grabs this public health event and subscribes through code, and that one doesn't get serialized, so it's like a temporary listener that's just there at runtime. So that's another cool thing about the Unity event. Okay, so let's just deal with the problem here. Now that is, suppose I wanted to make another observable, and I wanted to call that one, say, food. An integer observable, say it was called food. So now let's go through this and see what we got here. So now we would say food.value equals, let's just say minus equals 2. We'll subtract 2 from the food. And that's going to show up here, and then we'll grab it. We'll grab the text mesh component and subscribe the text mesh component to that. Text mesh pro, set its text, and we're in business, right? Yes and no. The values are correct, but the string formatting here is wrong. They both say health. Well, I want that food one to say food. So what we really need to do is get this out. We need to get that piece. We need to make that configurable. So we could do a couple of different things. One would be to make this property virtual, and then you could override it. That's not a good option. Not a good option. So what we can do, though, is we can do the following, and that is we can have, actually, let's put it up here. We can have a public, basically it's a public function that takes an input as an input of a type T, and the output, it delivers us a string. Okay, so and then we call this, what should we call this? I'll call it get UI text method. So we'll say set this to return the desired text. That's probably not a very good description, but basically what we're going to do is we have this one function, and what we'll do with that function is the following. Instead of specifying this here, we're just going to say, hey, we're going to call out to this function like this, and then we're going to put the current value in, and basically we're saying that this function will return us a string. So that way we can set this after we've created it, say on awake. So we can say health.get UI text method equals, and then we can just create our own little deal right here, and we can return $, health, and boom, it's all can be done just in one line. So now we have a configurable deal because we can take the same definition, and instead of that, for the food, we can return food. Okay, nice. But okay, okay, let's show that this works. So now we have health, food. I hit the space bar, they both work, and they're both saying what I want them to say. Fantastic. So we're done, right? Well, yes and no, we could be done there, but let's just say that what if we don't set one of these things? What happens? Well, we probably will get an error. So object reference not set to an instance of an object. In other words, we didn't initialize that text method. Well, we can do a nice thing here, and that is we can do this conditional null, what is it called? Null conditional operator. It's really great. So what we can do is we can do a null conditional operator, and that's new in C#6. So that basically says question mark dot says if this object is not null, then call this on it. And then we can use another really cool operator called a null coalescing operator. We can say basically it's a double question mark, and it says, okay, if this whole thing ends up being null, then let's return something else. And what we'll return will be just an empty string. So let's see if that works. So now we have not set that one on health. Let's hit play, and then this should just go to an empty string when we first start. And it does. So that's pretty much what we want. I mean, we could say, what we could do here, we could say, we could do that. That way, that would be immediately apparent that we have not set this UI text method. So then we would get the following. Yeah, error. And of course, we don't see the whole thing because the string is not set to be super huge. So you may want some kind of error there. But for now, we're just going to return an empty string. So that's nice. Or actually, we could just say, we could do that. Most of the time, your text box is going to be big enough to, or your text is going to be big enough to see that error text. So now we have something. Now this is starting to be actually useful. Okay, so there are a few things that one could do to improve this. We could require that this t, we could set a conditional on that, and we could say we want that really to be an I equatable. In other words, we want it to have an equals method. Then we could say down here, we could say if not val.equals value, then do this. So in other words, only change the UI, only send out this event when the value actually changes. I like that. That's actually a lot nicer. Okay, so that won't change this here. That won't change any of what we've done here. But basically, if we sit there and we continue to set the value to the same thing, we're not going to continue to invoke this event all the time. So that kind of cuts down on some just extraneous stuff. Now, one other thing that we may want to do, and that is, what if we want to yeah, no, I'm good. This is good. What if we want to, but what if we want to set, say we want to set this value without invoking that event. So we should probably make something that says set, call it, I don't know, set no invoke. And then that's going to be tval, and then that's just going to say, or new val. And then we'll say val equals new val. So I could see where that could be useful at some point, would be to set that without invoking your event. In any case, that's a nice piece to have there. And of course, I stuck that inside the property, which I didn't mean to do. So let's say sets the value. Let's just say set the value without invoking the event. And then on top of that, we may actually want a function that will send, you know, if we have this, well, let's not do that. I think that's good. So there's a bunch of different things you can do with this. So right now, what we're doing is we're sending out a string. But let's look and see if we could perhaps, maybe we have a toggle. And that toggle is super tiny. Let's see if we can make it bigger. Let's make it larger. Now we have this toggle. So how do we now get an event to that? We can't hook this up because this is the field that we set with that. It's either on or off. You know, we could go back to the way that we did it with the text component initially, which would be public toggle. And then we could toggle it. Whoops, and I put it in our observable class here. It needs to be down here, right? Public toggle lights or whatever. And then we can say lights. It's called lights.isOn. So let's turn it on. Let's start simply here. It's off right now. Let's turn it on and see if we get a toggle here. We didn't. Oh, that's because we haven't hooked it up. We got to stick it in there like that. And now we should see it come on, and we do. So what we want really is we want an event, a Unity event that actually gives us a Boolean here and not a string. Well, we could go through the rigmarole of recreating this one and making this an int, or we could just add another component to our generic class. So we could replace our string with a v here. Okay, so we're going to have to change some of this up, and we can no longer do this because we don't know what the default value of this is now. And we need to actually, instead of doing this, it's of course now complaining that this operator, this null conditional operator, can't be applied to an operand of type v because compiler doesn't know what type v is. Before it was a string, which can be null, etc. So, and remember that is what we're returning right here. So let's go ahead and do the check ourselves. If getText method is not equal to null, then invoke that. Else, let's invoke, we'll just do default of t. You may want to change that, not default of t, default of v. You may want to change that. You may want to actually do an error right here. Matter of fact, let's just do that. We could actually throw an argument null exception there if we wanted to. Let's do this. This is cooler. Yes, let's do this. So we'll do both. Whatever. Take your pick. So now we can actually specify both the value and the sent value. Hopefully that makes sense. And let's do this. Get, instead of UI text, let's say get format. Let's just say format value. Let's say format value method. How about that? That looks great. So now we have a format value method. So for our int observable, it will indeed be a string, as we said. And then let's create a bool observable, and we'll say that will actually be a boolean, and we'll actually send out a boolean. Make sense? Hopefully. And then that will just be that. Let's do a bool observable here. Let's do bool observable lights. We'll say lights dot format value method equals, and we'll say we'll just return the value. So we're just going to turn it on or off. And we're not doing that. What we want to do is say value. Now, really, actually, let's think about this, because actually a bool observable would be real easy, because all we really need to do is, well, no, because we have it all. I could say, what I was going to say is we could actually do a Unity event and then just derive it from Unity event. There's so many ways to do this of type bool, but we still would have to do our double, we would still have to contain the data inside of here and stuff. So remember, this still provides us a benefit because it contains the actual data as well as the event itself. So when we do that, and then let's do this, let's say lights, when we hit spacebar, lights.value equals not lights. So we'll toggle it. Let's see what we get. So we should get that other event to come on over here. And I didn't say that it was serializable. Another one of those traps you can fall into, ladies and gentlemen, and now it will appear very nicely for us. And then let's go ahead and connect that up to our toggle. We'll come in and look at the toggle, and we'll go to dynamic, and we'll say connect that to is on. Should turn it on when it first starts, and then as I hit the space bar, we get what we want. So there you go, people. One particular method of creating an observable using Unity events such that you can hook them up in whatever way you so desire, and you can also provide through this function that you set a method of adding some logic to what you send back, especially when it's like this. So I mean, we could do, if value is less than 3, it says low health, you could do stuff like that. So with that, I think we're going to end this episode, and thanks for watching.